Kevin Gordon here for Autosavant, coming to you from the 2013 BMW 328xi, the all-wheel drive, 2-liter turbocharged, sort of mid-level 3 Series. Figured I'd take you through sort of our normal daily commute with the car while talking about it. So first of all, what makes up this particular one? It's a reasonably highly outfitted 3 Series. So first of all, it's the luxury line of cars. So now the 3 Series, you can buy them in like sport, modern, luxury, a bunch of sort of trim levels that start a certain way. So the luxury one, of course, comes with your luxury-like features. Add to that the cold weather package, the technology package, the driver assistance package, as well as the premium package, and you get this 3 Series in total. So a car that starts at $38,000 comes in just above $51,500, which of course seems like quite a bit of money, but if you price it competitively across sort of these smaller sport luxury sedans, it pretty much falls right where it should. And in this one, you do get a lot of interesting options and content. And even though it's not new, one of the more interesting things about the 328 is the N20 2-liter turbocharged inline-4 that powers these cars these days. It's 240 horsepower, 255 foot-pounds of torque, and depending on what you read and from who, you get kind of a wide variety of opinion on it. And what I would say is, for a turbocharged inline-4 that makes this kind of power, it does a good job. From a noise and harshness perspective, it isn't class leading, but the thing does make piles of power. And if you listen to what BMW says about it, which is they wanted an engine that made power like their old inline 6s while returning 15% fuel economy improvements, that they've clearly done. I mean, this car's rated 2233. And during the time that we've had it, even though I've been anything but kind to it, we've averaged 27 to 28 miles to the gallon, which is quite impressive. The 2-liter turbo does have a very small range at the bottom of its rev range where it's out of its, operating efficiency level. People would call that turbo lag. It's not really fair to call that lag. It's just not in the band of RPM where the turbo's designed to make boost. That does disappear very quickly. I mean, the thing makes boost starting around 1500 RPM, and if you're in like constant cruise and start to lay into it, it's very quick to start providing big gobs of torque and really propel this car right along. I mean, it's a sub 6 second 0 to 60 car, which, if you again turn back the clock 10 years, is a full out sports car. It's just in today's world, the bar's been raised quite a bit. It being direct injected does lead to, cold startups sound really diesel-like. At idle, there's a bit of clatter. It's a shame that BMW couldn't sort of just push this engine. I imagine it's probably a generation away from being sort of completely transparent and really being a very, very sweet unit. The luxury line 3 Series cars are outfitted with BMW's 8-speed automatic transmission, which really is as good as you're going to get in an automatic these days. If you put it in its sport mode, it's smarter about the gears it's holding. It does hold, ratios when it should. If you're in corners, it doesn't shift. If you fully let off the throttle, it holds gears. It's bright. It drops multiple ratios. Again, you really couldn't ask for much more in an 8-speed transmission. And I will say that putting something with this many ratios attached to a torquey turbocharged motor is not a small challenge. And in that, they've really hit sort of every potential goal. It doesn't get caught out. It's intelligent. Really, it's a pretty quality demonstration of engineering from BMW. Of course, if you see or read a review of a modern BMW, one of the topics you're going to hear about is their automatic start-stop system. And most of them are flat-out negative, that it's unrefined, so on and so forth. I guess that might be true, right? There's a little bit of a stutter as it takes off, but it's one of those things that as you live with the car, I honestly believe 2 months into the life of having this car, you would completely forget about it. It's one of those things that you just sort of learn to adjust to. It does get you better city, economy. I don't think it's that big of a deal at all. So just a little commentary here. The one thing that you may notice is we don't use a lavalier microphone. And people either love that or hate that. And it's one of those things that I really do want to stick to, because we're on the highway right now, going highway speeds, right? Currently like 72 into 65. Go ahead and arrest me for breaking the speed limit by 7 miles an hour. But I think it's important for you guys to get to hear what these things actually sound like. So if you were the passenger in the car, and that's where the microphone is, it's sort of right where the passenger's head would be, what does it actually sound like? What would it be like to carry on a conversation with you? And what I can report is it's quiet in here, but it's nowhere near the quietest of these small luxury cars. Like if you get into a modern Buick, for example, they're silent in comparison. But the ride's composed, it's quiet enough, road undulations and those type of things are really well managed. It's, again, where BMW still can do things right is in their suspension tuning, their ride dynamics, the balance of their cars. Really, all that stuff is very good still in a modern 3 Series. And while we're cruising along the highway, it's kind of important to talk about the interior that you get. So in the luxury line cars, you of course get the upgraded leather interiors. This one's their saddle brown, which is quite attractive. On the outside, this car is painted in the glacial, I forget which one, silver, which is of course a couple extra $100, as the Germans like to do for their metallic paints. But it's a very pretty color and works well with the new sort of design styling on the outside of the BMWs. The rest of the interior is very, very handsome. I mean, the BMWs wind up feeling a bit more sedate and I think a little bit more old-fashioned than a lot of their competitors these days, but that's not a bad thing in any way. They have buttons where they need them. iDrive, I actually love it. I think these controller-based interfaces are the only way to go for interacting with technology systems in modern cars. There's a reason why computers and laptops still have keyboards and touchpads. And I know you can say that, well, but iPads, you're not sort of responsible for doing something else. If you're in a meeting, for example, and you need to type meeting minutes, what do you use? If you're using your iPad, you're constantly looking at it. If you can touch type, right, if you can use a controller interface, you can do it without constantly looking down. Everything else that you touch that's supposed to be soft touch in here is soft touch. The wood is extremely nice. I do think that BMW's sort of habit of potentially having 3 color structures come together, so the roof in this car and the headliner's tan, door panels are black, and of course the saddle leather's brown, and then you also get this sort of aluminum strip in here. So there are places where the 4 or 5 of those different combinations come together that to me is a little strange, but all in all, it's very handsome, very well built, everything's nice to the touch, materials are really very high quality. The seats in here are sort of surprisingly flat on the bottoms. It's not that they're not comfortable or well padded, and if you buy the sport versions, you can of course get bigger bolsters, but it is sort of a surprising thing to me that BMW and its luxury line cars decide to make the seat bottoms, at least, as flat as these things really are. With that being said, they're comfortable. The thigh support, even though this one doesn't have any of the additional thigh support, bolsters on it are good. Seating position's good. Visibility out of here is good. This car with the technology and the driver's assistance package gets you blind spot detection, and kudos to BMW there. Their blind spot detection system probably is one of the nicest ones that I've dealt with. It doesn't falsely alert you, and if you go to put your turn signal on when there's somebody over there, you get a little vibration in the steering wheel. It's not intrusive, but it definitely does its job without being sort of overly flashy. The rest of the technology in here is good. I mean, you don't get a ton else except for, of course, all the cameras. So you do get the, forward encroachment camera that lets you see on both sides of the front of the car if you're pulling out of some hedges, which I think is a much more European thing than it is American. But of course, BMW still calls their cars the ultimate driving machine. And I think that's the thing to close this out with, which is that lost in a modern BMW? I can tell you that it's definitely changed. The modern BMW, to me, I think actually somehow has managed to sort of wind up having sort of a veneer or a facade put over it. The way they drive is still completely there. I mean, these things are brilliant little cars from a driving perspective. The suspension's all right, the feeling of them is still good. They really are excellent driving cars. But on a day-to-day basis, there's enough sort of technology overlay on them that it can get a bit lost. I mean, if you drove a 3 Series very casually all the time, you can sort of get lulled into thinking that, all the capability and muscle of these things is no longer there. That it just feels sort of washed over and whitewashed away from the performance credentials that it always had. But if you bother to, put it in sport mode, put the transmission into its sportiest shift mode, these things, really will rip right along. Even with the all-wheel drive system, they run really along quite nicely. They're speedy. I guess you could say that you can fault BMW for putting as much sort of a safety net and dulling down what made them BMWs. But when you really get down to it, they still are very, very impressive cars. And probably, at 10/10ths, the best driving cars that you can still buy in this class. And with that, Kevin Gordon for Autosavant. Look forward to talking to you guys soon.